will put an alarm, so it will be the phone who will tell you that you are over or not. Okay? The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Distinguished panelists, excellencies, distinguished president. I think that the case of Germany is not as far from the case of other countries next to Germany. This is the first remark I can make. When looking to the title of the event, State Religious Segregation and Discrimination, I was wondering myself if Islamophobia is not as equal or synonym to all the phobia, the religiophobia of other religious traditions. I think this is very important as a basis. Islamophobia is not singular or particular phobia. It's the same as all the other phobia of religions and beliefs. This is the second thing. The European context, in reality, witnesses that the rise in the recent events, the recent days and weeks in Germany, of the far right in Germany, with the alternative for Germany, AfD, securing 20%, 0.8% of votes in 2025 elections, reflects a broader European trend, as I said it in the beginning. Similar parties are gaining power or influence, mainly in France, but also in Italy and in some Scandinavian countries, for instance, Sweden, and in the Eastern Europe, as for instance, Hungary. This dynamic is driven by the following elements or pillars. The first pillar is the anti-migrant rhetoric, which is gaining spaces in minds and speeches and policies, unfortunately. Parties like the AfD exploit fears surrounding immigration, which is, these fears are true, naturally speaking, conflating migrants, Muslims particularly, and a dangerous question of terrorism risks. The second pillar is security narratives. For instance, in Germany, while 15% of terrorist acts in 2025 were attributed to far-right groups, media and populist parties disproportionately focus on Islamist attacks. So we have an inequality of treatment of media news, and this leads to fueling stigmatization of some citizens who had Islamic belief. I think that the key factors in Germany now, which are similar, as I said it in the beginning, to what's happening in France, for instance, from 1 or 2 decades, and mainly from 1 decade after 1815, the attacks of 1815, is that the initiatives of ideas or policies to deportation of the citizens who are migrants, and the main citizens of them, they are not migrants, they are German citizens. We assimilate them to their origins, as they are migrants and titans, and may tighten border controls, reinforcing anti-immigrant rhetoric. For instance, according to Context News in 2025. The capitalization of this phenomenon of reducing citizens to their origins by faith, belief, and nationality is really dangerous and problematic. For instance, in Germany and other countries. The second point I wanted to share with you is that we have a sentiment, we say in France, we are feeling that we have somehow an institutionalized Islamophobia, as if Islamophobia is going to be organized officially by some policies or some religious policies. For instance, in Germany, we have some data which are alarming for me. 38% of Muslim organizations are under surveillance without tangible evidence. So this source of news for me is not sufficient or enough to qualify that we have an organized state Islamophobia. For me, it's not enough, because it is based on suspicion too from the other side. The second element that hinders the basics of Islamophobia, maybe in Germany, is somehow the interpretation of some laws which are discriminatory. And this was, for instance, the Berlin's neutrality law bans headscarves for teachers and impedes most construction, marginalizing somehow 4 to 5 million German Muslims, according to others. But even this pillar or this point is as similar as other interpretation of Islamophobia laws in France, for instance. We can make a comparison between the law of separatism, la loi de séparatisme, in France, for instance, from three years ago, since 3 years ago. The third point I wanted to share with you is the impact of the speeches, the hatred speeches now, of far-right attacks, but not only far-right attacks, even ignorant speeches on media attacks. You know, a lot of persons use of the same tools of this liberty or freedom of speeches to make attacks against the migrants. An example, the refugees who are targeted in 2024. We have a lot of witnesses and news about this point. Media wrongly link insecurity to immigration. This is the fourth point, which is really dangerous for me and alarming, and we have to ponder it. How media can strongly influence the interpretation and the perception of immigration, and the reduction from immigration to such nationality and such belief or religion. This Islamophobia is really dynamic. It follows the same dynamic in Europe, because migrant Muslim conflation, if we can say, and we can call it like this, for instance, in France, Italy, far-right parties equate Islam with security threats, despite data showing that 80% of EU terrorist acts are perpetrated by far-right groups. So we misuse the data about the attacks, because we have a lot of data about the far-right attacks in Europe, mainly in Europe, but we focus mainly, strongly, on the Islamic or the immigrant attacks, terrorist attacks that we have to condemn forcefully. The second point about the European dynamics is the normalization of hate speech, which is another point d'achoppement, problematic point. The EU recorded 1,926 Islamophobic incidents in 2023. So it means that plus 30% versus 2021. which laws banning halal, for instance, practices or minarets in 9 countries, in 9 European countries. The first one, maybe I will call you the ban of 2009 in Switzerland, for instance. But we had a lot of cases before the case of Switzerland. What all these elements, pillars, conditions, what are the consequences of our main target and main advocating human rights, which is freedoms of belief, freedoms of religion and belief. The first is the restriction of the freedom of religion and belief. In Germany, for instance, 80% of Islamophobia complaints in schools involve somehow veiled students or teachers excluded under secularism policies. But this information, I'm sorry, I have closed. So I'm going to end. To sum up.
You can do 1 minute.
Yeah, just 2 minutes.
Sure.
So the consequences of freedoms, the restriction of the rise of violence, because we create violence by another violence, an interpretation of another law of violence. The security measures of policies can push ignorant persons, youth, to act violently speaking. So this is, un cercle vicious circle. What are the recommendations for the states and the stakeholders who can make change, real change about this situation? The coupling migration debates from security issues. I think that we should separate the security issues from the focalization on migration. Insecurity is not due only to migration. For instance, we can launch media campaigns to counter migrant terrorism conflation. We can maybe reform or make more plain some anti-terrorism policies. People and persons, students in education, for instance, students that are not very aware about the true policies, and explain these policies may mitigate and diminish, the risk of violence in this vicious circle. Inclusive education as prevention against radicalization. And here we have a similar phenomena between Germany, for instance, and France, because we have the same problem in both countries. We do not have a real program of education to youth about the prevention of radicalization, religious radicalization, for instance. So we have to train educators to identify Islamophobia and address biases effectively. And the last point, I think, for me, is protecting minority communities, who are the victims of the major communities when they are under the focus and the target of FoRB. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor. Indeed, I think it's been very clear your presentation on how Islamophobia, and I would actually call it religiophobia, and we will see on my presentation how it's not only Islam that gets a phobia within the German society and even by institutionalized government actions, and how this creates segregation. I mean, hatred speech. Of course, we all agree with freedom of speech, but now where is the limit of freedom of speech? Where is the limit of freedom of religion? Not all rights have their limits when they are stepping on each other. So our next speaker, it's Mr. GHRD. He was last year knighted with the Knight of the Order of St. George. he has been a mayor, and he has been dealing a lot with community actions in the UK, and has faced what discrimination is. And we asked him what is his view from an external viewpoint of what is happening in Germany. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and it's going to be hard to follow in the footsteps of the wise words of the professor, but I will try. Human rights in Germany in 2025. I believe one of the biggest challenges facing Germany at the moment, as well as Europe in general, is the way we handle immigration and racism. Germany has traditionally been a nation which has been an example to the rest of Europe, and indeed the world, when it comes to dealing with racial issues. I want to emphasize on two issues here: violence, or the threat of violence, against minorities, and also against women, specifically choosing to wear head coverings. The far-right parties are rising up to take advantage of these incredibly sensitive issues, and we must try and stand up against these forces to protect our nations. Although we should have an understanding of why extreme issues and beliefs are coming into play, we should also take into account that there are a number of people involved in the parties on the right that are not racist. I believe it's a good thing that we can have a serious debate on illegal immigration without innocent people being called racists or bigots. The only problem we have is the small parties who are on the fringes that call for violence or injustice against immigrants and women wearing headscarves. A moderate sign of showing affection to one's religion is a good thing. We also know that a lot of members of minorities have helped make our nations, and this is absolutely true for the German state. We need to take a step back and understand all the goodness that comes from an integrated society and the wealth of cultures that make up the European nations. Extreme far-right parties must have much more respect for people of different cultures and races. Whether this can be the case with the Jewish community or the Muslim community, be very mindful that extreme far-right parties hate all people who are different, not only certain races, and these parties should never be given platforms in our political systems. One thing I would like to make clear, however, having been in politics for a number of years myself, and being elected a number of times, is that parties should not be labeled as the far right for the simple reason that they want to limit or ask questions about the influx of illegal immigration. To achieve a harmonious balance, we must try and tackle these issues with humanity and justice. Europe and the world are seeing massive shifts in opinions as to how we treat people from different cultures, religions, and ethnicity differences. Legal immigration should also look at how we can successfully assimilate and contribute in Germany and other nations to give back to the nation that offers you a home. In Germany, just like the rest of Europe and indeed the world, racism led by serious misunderstandings about foreign cultures is playing out very dangerously. We must be extremely careful how we tread forward with this subject, and it is playing in the hands of the extreme right wing and the racists. We seem to have two sides, the liberal left and the conservative right, with a larger gap in opinion and popularity than any time in history. Germany is an incredibly tolerant nation, so a balanced approach going forward is a very important consideration. Last year, the Federal Ministry of the Interior said that hate crimes in the previous year had reached the highest level ever recorded. These were especially true of hate crimes against the Roma people and those based on sexual orientation. Racism and hostility towards foreigners were also major factors of concern. According to the report of the independent expert group on anti-Muslim sentiment, it was claimed that anti-Muslim racism was widespread across German society. Obviously, these reports are extremely worrying, especially if you take into account that Germany became a haven of tolerance and goodwill towards immigrants after the horrors of the Second World War. Governments must take steps to effectively look at concerns people have with illegal immigration in the country and counter this with sensible policies that prevent a hatred of immigrants and also allow more assimilation in the country as a whole. A report conducted by the Fundamental Rights Agency in 2024 found that Germany was one of the top 10 countries in the EU where people of African descent experienced racial discrimination. A research project funded by the German Research Foundation found that 33% of respondents felt they had been discriminated against during interactions with the police. In summary, it seems that much more work has to be immediately done to halt the injustices and human rights violations occurring in the German nation. Tolerance, understanding of other cultures and beliefs must be taught from the time young children go to school and must be added to the curriculum. Also, governments must also deal with the root causes and issues that inflame these issues. The fear of illegal immigration is, in my opinion, the biggest factor in this, and we must now start talking sensibly about this subject in a compassionate and reasoned way, and also find solutions to control it, as this is the largest weapon for the racist. Germany must do a lot more, as the country is looked as a beacon of justice around the world. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. GHRD. I'm picking up on two of the points that you mentioned about teaching children in school from early age about tolerance, about diversity, as a way of one day in the future having an even more tolerant and accepting and collaborative society. We teach our children, most likely if they ever become politicians or lawyers or managers of big populations, we will have better chances. So this brings me to part of my presentation, where we've been talking about Islam. As you probably are aware of, when different countries speak of religion, they often link it to migration. So migration equal to religious affairs equal to migration, which is not necessarily true. Even if a lot of the new religious movements, and by new religious movements, I don't mean that they are new on their own, but that they are new into that country, they come through migration, because we live in a globalized world where, fortunately, it's easier and easier to travel around, to visit, to go on vacation, to take holidays, to seek job opportunities in other countries. And of course, people, they don't live their religion in their country, because religion is not something you have, it's something you are, something you do. I'm a member of the Church of Scientology, and I would like to show you a witness, témoignage, I don't know how you could say that in English, of of a person, of a woman, who has suffered discrimination in Germany because of being a member of the Church of Scientology. A discrimination that has impeded her to have a proper job, to be able to properly feed her family, just because of her religion. I'm not sure if you would believe me if I tell you that in many places in Germany, when you apply for a job that is related or that is managed by any government authority, being federal, state, regional, or even local, people are asked to sign a paper resigning specifically from Scientology. Right? This is segregation. This is, I mean, if I would tell you that this was happening before World War II, you know this, it happened, you know, and it ended very badly. I am aware that Scientologists will not follow the same path, will not have the same consequences, but it started with segregating people, not allowing them to work in a place or another, or to apply for something that the government is giving to everybody. We're gonna hear a testimony and anonymized. You will only hear her voice. You will have it subtitled also in English, but we won't see her face and we won't show her name. This is 6 minutes long, so I ask you to please pay careful attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, the following is my report. I'm German female and 66 years old. I'm a manager in the field of intercultural education and training. I will contact you by audio and not with my surname because I fear discrimination if I publish by video. After more than 20 years as a permanent employee in a German educational institution, it was in February 2010, I and all other employees received the request to sign the following declaration. By signing the contract, Ms. T expressly undertakes not to work according to the technology of L. Ron Hubbard and expressly rejects his technology. The term L. Ron Hubbard technology was understood to refer to membership in Scientology. As a Scientologist, this meant that I would have to stop practicing the Scientology religion, a matter of my private life that I think played no role in my profession. This declaration was to become part of an amendment employment contract. The reason provided by the management of the educational facility for this regulation was that the certification of our educational institution by an external service provider required this additional clause. It was suggested to me that a refusal to sign would result in a termination of my contract. Until then, I had been an obvious matter for me that the workplace has to maintain a religious philosophical neutrality and that any such influence by the employer is prohibited, as well as for me towards the seminar participants. Thus, this contractual clause violated Article 4 of the German Constitution, which states, the freedom of faith, conscience, and religion or belief is inviolable, and Article 5 of the Constitution, everyone has a right to freely express and disseminate his or her opinion in word, writing, and images. As the clause required a dissociation from my religion, I replied in an interview by the management of this educational facility that I would not sign the clause, as this is totally against my fundamental rights and my dignity as a person. The management did not want to discuss my motives with me. Instead, I receiving the following message the next day. We hurriedly inform you that you can still consider signing the amendment to the employment contract until 18 March 2010, 3 weeks after receipt of the amendment contract. We would like to advise you again to consider your step as refusing to sign means refusing our working basis. If you are unable to do so, you must expect consequences under labor law. I strongly feel this is a clear threat to me, a discrimination based on religious beliefs. After that, I got the termination of my job. Further, in my professional life, I have been presented with this type of sect filth on 3 other occasions. Each time I found myself in a difficult situation. Refusal to sign would mean not getting the contract or the funding requested. On the other hand, I was very reluctant to perpetuate this discriminatory practice. Regularly, I asked who this sect filth came from. I was then told in each case that it would be automatically enclosed with a contractual application and probably came from a federal authority. No one could tell me anything more precise. Even independently of the sect filth, I was denied jobs as soon as information was passed on, even if only rumor that I was a member of the Church of Scientology. My many years of professional and voluntary commitment in the field of democracy, human rights, and youth participation, which was also very much recognized within my political party, had no more significance when in September 2020, someone pointed out in an anonymous email that I was a Scientologist. Shortly afterwards, I was advised to resign from my elected function. Otherwise, my case would be publicly discussed and decided at a public meeting of members for the election of another person. To avoid further negative consequences to my professional career, I prefer to resign from my elected function. The sect filth practice against the Scientologists in Germany has become epidemic. It is time that the government gets some help from the UN and OSCE to reorient its practices in alignment to human rights. Thank you for any assistance you can provide.
So, like this one, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of cases in the country. And what happens is that only few Scientologists have decided to go to court on this. Because what happens is that the cases where they have gone to court and they have won, the authorities, the only thing that has occurred is that they have changed the clause. They have worded differently, but with the same result. And now this happens also specifically in Bavaria. If you can go, in Bavaria, specifically the authorities, when a city hall makes a public tender to find companies that will take care of the garden of the city, right? They have to make it public, and they have to announce what are the requisites to participate in this public tender, and maybe be elected to execute the job of cleaning the gardens or cutting the bad leaves of the trees, or to paint walls, or in a hospital, for example. They have to publish it. What are the requisites? These public tenders, since more than 10 years, the authorities they are obliged to publish it in the European Union transparency tenders website. So if you go there, you go to the tender and you write the word Scientology, it will tell you how many public tenders require people to sign a paper resigning from Scientology. Okay? Only in the last 2 months, almost 300 of these public tenders have been issued. Now, go, this you see a number of them, so keep going, so go back. So this is one of the documents people are asked to sign, right? So basically, anyone who applies for these tenders, they are being told, do not associate with Scientologists. If you are a Scientologist, don't even approach us. And please do not hire any Scientologists, because then you will lose your contract with these people. Right? Next. These are different types. Reasons from last year. Right? Now, this is a number of professions. Kindergartner, police officer, teacher, prosecutor, university lecturer, military cleaner, right? I mean, it must be difficult to imagine what's the relationship of the dangerosity of being a Scientologist with cleaning the bed sheets of a clinical outset of the city hall. Now, and because I've talked to many Scientologists who have suffered this, I get a little bit passionate when I talk about this. So instead of talking, I'm gonna read you something I prepared for you so that I stick to it and I don't go, as we say in Spanish, por las ramas, like on the leaves of the trees, okay? So we confront a chilling reality, the systemic religious segregation of Scientologists in Germany, a practice that dehumanizes, marginalizes, and denies a minority community its most fundamental rights. This is not a relic of history. It is a present-day betrayal of the principles enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the European Convention of Human Rights. The German government use of the Schutzerklärung clauses, which is the translation is a protective declaration. I prefer to call them, the witness called it sect filter, which is how it has been called for many years, because the German government refuses to recognize the Scientology as a religion, even though more than 50 German court decisions have stated that the church has the right to be treated as any other religion. I prefer to call these clauses faith breakers, because they call on people to break their faith if they want to continue their job or they want to accept their job. So they use these faith breakers in tenders, demanding individuals and businesses to disavow affiliation with Scientology, thus creating a de facto system of religious segregation. By barring Scientologists from competing for contracts, accessing grants, or securing public sector employment, the state enforces a hierarchy of religion. This is not mere discrimination. It is the deliberate exclusion of a specific religious community from civic and economic life. As you heard, the lady who spoke, she was a high representative of a specific political party, which I won't mention, at a state level in Germany. And well, she explained what happened. Somebody wrote an email saying she's a Scientologist, and she was forced to resign or to discuss this publicly with everybody else, which would entail that probably she will be all over the media, and many people who would still buy or who get grants from the government for their companies will not dare to hire her, because they will have to sign a paper that they are not hiring Scientologists. And I go back to my script. This is not mere discrimination, it is the deliberate exclusion of a religious community from civic and economic life, mirroring the darkest chapters of segregation policies. Consider the Munich clinic tender, a contract for modular furniture, medical supplies, and shelving. Goods unrelated to religious practice, condition on signing a faith breaker. So if you want to sell furniture to the city hall, you need to stop being a Scientologist, or you cannot hire a Scientologist to bring the furniture to the city hall. Such policies do not protect public order. This is usually the excuse, no, because of security, because of public order, but OSCE has already stated and written in many times that security cannot be an excuse to discriminate people from their religion. These practices institutionalize prejudice, segregating Scientologists into a marginalized underclass, denied the right to work, sustain their families, or participate in society. When a state weaponizes bureaucracy to strip individuals of livelihoods based on belief, it dehumanizes them. Scientologists are forced to choose between their faith and their survival, a coercion that treats them as less than human. The faith breaker reduces their identity to a checkbox, branding them as suspect solely for their spiritual convictions. This dehumanization, and I know this is a word that they don't like me to use, because one time I was giving a presentation about this at the OSCE, and the representative of the German mission, the German representation to the OSCE came to see me and said, "Thank you for all what you have said, but please don't use the word dehumanization." Why? You are making a Scientologist to be less human because he's a Scientologist. Because he cannot have a job, he cannot access a job because he's a Scientologist. So this, to them, this is dehumanization. You may call it something else. But that's what they feel. The hundreds of Scientologists I have talked to, that's what they feel. This dehumanization is compounded by state-sponsored stigmatization. For example, 3 years ago, the Ministry of Interior of Bavaria, they produced a comic video that is available on YouTube, dehumanizing Scientologists completely as a comic. And the program, and this was launched by the Minister of Interior of Bavaria, was to teach this in schools. They wanted to go to high schools with this video about the Scientologists. I have another witnessing, but we won't play on this event, of a child who suffered this in his school. For decades, German authorities have propagated the false narrative, faking wrong purposes for our church, ignoring over 50 court rulings from Germany that affirm the legitimacy of the religiosity of our church. By denying Scientologists the protections of Article 4 of the German Constitution, the state perpetuates a lie that justifies their exclusion. These practices flagrantly violate the following: Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and they do this criminalizing the manifestation of our belief. It violates Article 26 of the ICCPR, enforcing a systemic inequality. And it even violates a European directive from 2014 about equal treatment in procurement, perverting public procurement into a tool of exclusion. Luckily, in 2019, the UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion and of Belief at the time, Dr. Ahmed Shahid, he wrote a letter to the German authorities condemning this very practice, as they are presuming us of guilt, while the German government has been investigating the church for more than 30 years, even infiltrating people in the church, trying to buy documents from staff members. This is fully documented, and yet they have not managed to put a single legal criminal case that would be able to condemn the church or its members of nothing. So it's 30 years of waste of funds, 30 years of dehumanizing Scientologists, human beings. And despite these warnings from the UN, from the OSCE, from the more than 50 court rulings, the German governments, left or right, they continue to do exactly the same. Let this truth resonate. In 2025, a European democracy is practicing religious apartheid, not in the shadows. Unfortunately, this is not a religious apartheid like in other countries. We don't suffer physically. We are not attacked physically. We are not arrested in the street just because of being a Scientologist. Okay? But thanks God, I mean, we are in Germany. It's normal. It is expected that this doesn't happen. But why this other thing still happens? So in the last 10 years, more than 3,400 public tenders have been issued by German authorities, requiring applicants to resign from Scientology and to resign from hiding Scientologists. More than 300 only in the last 90 days. Scientologists are being erased from public life. We cannot even participate in politics in Germany. You have Christians participating in politics, you have Buddhists, you have Muslims, you have atheists. Why not Scientology? I mean, in particular, I'm not interested in politics, but if I would want, why could I not? So this, to us, is not governance, it's a moral catastrophe. When a state mandates that a man must renounce to his faith to install a hospital shelf, it commits an act of spiritual violence so brazen, so devoid of humanity, that it echoes the segregationist codes of centuries past, providing that bigotry, when codified, knows no shame. The world must awaken. The time for accountability is now. So we hope to be able to bring cases to court, but unfortunately, in the last 30 years, this has not been of any use to stop it. So now I will finish my presentation, and I think now I will open the floor for you to make any comments or any question to any of us on the issues that we have talked about. 8 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your statements of review, very interesting. And I will ask you, maybe, sorry I was a little bit late, maybe you have underlined this issue, but what would Scientology be accused of in Germany, particularly, more than other religions or spiritual institutions? What? Why?
Why and what?
Rationally, from your point of view, of course, maybe you have another explanation. Thank you.
So thank you for the question. Rationally, it's a bit difficult because, I mean, they haven't managed to put one single legal case against us. They only say that by taking out of context excerpts of the more than 75 million words that are the doctrines of Scientology, so the teachings of Scientology, if you want to read them all, is about 75 million words. Okay? So in 75 million words, you can take out of context whatever you want to make it seem, look, and intend exactly whatever you want. So what the German authorities are portraying about us is that we want to take over the German society. The almighty Church of Scientology wants to take over the state, or the mighty state of Germany. Wow, this is a bit flattering in a way, you know, like, okay, maybe in Germany we are, what, 40,000, 50,000 members. We cannot participate in politics even, and the state is afraid of us taking over. Okay, it's a bit nonsense to me, right? So honestly, I don't know what is in their mind, but it seems to be in the system somehow. I've been to OSCE in Warsaw, and when I went to introduce myself to an ambassador of Germany, I say, "Hi, Ivan," they shake my hand, "Ivan is of Scientology," their face goes white, and they suddenly have to run away. I mean, I'm not that dangerous. You know, I may make bad jokes, but I'm not a dangerous person. Our people is not dangerous, you know. Doesn't mean that we are perfect. We all have our defaults. But one thing we have clear, we try to abide by the law. And this is one of the main policies in Scientology. You respect the law of the country. I hope I have more or less answered the question. Anything you want to add on your presentation? Or
Just maybe something about the Islamic side in the German society, but for me in the European society, the phenomena is European, it's not only in Germany. The reasons, if I can afford you some answer about the question concerning the reasons for the Islamophobia, is that in France, for instance, Islam is the second religion by the number of believers, and the history, mainly the colonial history with Africa, may be an argument to explain this, because we have long affiliation, long history with France, for instance, Maghreb and Africa. But the problem is that we have une instrumentalisation abusive, the use of Islamic presence, Muslim presence, which is not the same as Islamic presence, because the word Islam refers to the religion with a big R. Muslim, it refers to citizens. It's men. Basically speaking, it may refer to the citizens. And the use, as I said it in my expose, my survey, is that we have the rise of the far-right policies, far-right wings in Europe that uses this phenomena of the presence of Muslims as a dangerous presence against the Judeo-Christian society, to say the words. So we have speeches, formal speeches in the media that place and instrumentalize these elements against some parts, minor parts of the society, of the believers. The case of Germany, I think, it's somehow different from the case, the basic history of the case of France, because the case in Germany is a peaceful society. The change, or le revirement, je ne sais pas comment le traduire, la bascule, brings ideas of other societies where the far right is progressive, publicly speaking, because of massive, and I say the word between brackets, massive migration, the problems of migration. So it's different for me, from my point of view. It's really different. It's not linked to a long history, for instance, of the case of France, where we have a linkage, a deep linkage. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 1 more minute. You want to give a ending message? 1 minute?
Yes, just very, very quickly. I mean, there has to be much more harmony and understanding from all sides. So we just have to talk about this subject a lot more, and maybe even talk about religion, you know, immigration and everything. We just need to discuss these things to create more harmony. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emilian. Thank you very much, Iftikhar. Thank you all you for having endured this hour with our presentations. I hope we have given you some information that you probably did not know. And so, thank you.